They found her kneeling in the dust behind the theater barn, wrists bleeding, mouth gagged with a torn strip of lace. The noon sun struck her hair until it looked like fire, and the dirt on her cheeks streaked with tears. She hadn't made it far. Lila Hart had been running since sunrise, chased by men who laughed when they caught her. The sound of music and drunken shouts poured from the saloon nearby, but nobody cared that a girl was being dragged behind the stables. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. This story gets much more intense, and I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Her sister, Rowan, screamed once, a sharp, short cry that ended when a gun handle cracked across her face. The smell of whiskey and sweat hung heavy in the heat. A man in a black vest crouched beside Lila, his boots sinking into the mud by her cheek. "Your brother made me a promise," he said, his voice smooth and cruel. "And when a man breaks a promise, his family pays the debt." Lila lifted her eyes, shaking. "Please," she whispered, "don't hurt him." The man smiled, thin and cold. "That depends on you." He tossed a saddle to the ground. Dust rose in a pale cloud. The leather was cracked and old, stamped with initials she didn't recognize, E.B. She didn't know why it mattered, but he did. His name was Clay Rourke, a man who built his wealth by robbing gold convoys and paying off lawmen who looked the other way. His lips curled when he spoke, like he could already taste someone's fear. "Steal this saddle," he said, "from a man named Jed Mallory. You bring it back, your brother walks free. Fail, and he's bones in Pacola Creek." Lila's breath shook. She thought of Owen, her brother, who once taught her to shoot behind their father's barn. "Never trust anyone but family," he used to say. The memory burned now like the sun on her neck, because family was the only reason she'd agreed to this madness. That night, the sisters waited near a lonely ranch outside Deadwood. The corral creaked in the wind. Horses shifted nervously, sensing the fear clinging to the air. They had no weapon, no plan, just the desperate hope that two frightened girls could outsmart a man known for killing witnesses. When Jed Mallory rode into view, they froze. He was older than they expected, broad-shouldered, his face weathered by sun and silence. A man who'd seen every kind of betrayal and survived them all. His horse, Juniper, carried the old marshal's saddle, the one that held a secret neither girl yet understood. Lila's fingers trembled as she reached for the reins. Rowan whispered a prayer she didn't believe anymore. Somewhere deep in the forest, an owl cried, sharp and lonely. If they took that saddle, maybe Owen would live. But if whatever hid inside it was what Rourke truly wanted, saving their brother might mean losing their souls. The leather felt heavier than it looked. Every sound was too loud, every second too long. Rowan hissed, "Hurry before he comes back." But Jed Mallory had tracked enough coyotes to know when someone was sneaking near his barn. He moved like a shadow, quiet, steady, watching the moonlight fall on two strangers who looked more scared than dangerous. His first words weren't a threat. They were soft, almost tired. "You girls lost." Lila froze. Rowan turned, hands raised. Then a horse snorted, and the rope slipped. The saddle dropped with a thud. Rowan stumbled back, tripped, and fell hard. The cry that came out of her was half pain, half fear. Jed rushed forward without thinking. She tried to crawl, but his hand caught her arm, steady, firm. "Easy," he said quietly. Her breath hitched. "It hurts." He could feel the joint out of place. He knew that pain. Without another word, he guided her arm, slow and careful, until it popped back where it belonged. The sound was dull, but she gasped like lightning had struck her. Rowan's eyes filled with tears. She stared up at him, unsure if she should thank him or hit him. "Who sent you?" Jed asked. Lila just stared at the dirt. Her jaw shook, but she said nothing. Jed's eyes fell to the saddle. The stitches had been cut. Something inside glimmered faintly under the firelight, a small brass key. He picked it up, turned it over, and froze. The letters read FNB 47. He remembered that number. Boone's number. Boone, the marshal he hadn't saved in time. The man whose saddle he rode every day. Jed looked back at the sisters, his voice low but calm. "Where'd you get this key?" Lila broke then. The story came out in stumbles, half sobs, half anger. how their brother was held near Pacola Creek, how Rourke would kill him if they didn't steal that saddle. When she finished, silence sat heavy between them. Jed tossed the key into the air once, caught it, and stared at the fire. Then he said quietly, "You stole from the wrong man, but maybe the right one to help you." Rowan blinked. "You'll help us." Jed looked into the flames. "Not for you," he said softly. "For Boone, and for what's right." The sisters exchanged a look, unsure if they'd just been saved or pulled into something even worse. Because whatever that key opened, it wasn't just a vault. It was a door to the kind of secrets men kill to keep buried. Jed didn't sleep that night. He sat by the fire with his hat tipped low, the brass key rolling between his fingers. The sisters huddled together near the fence, wrapped in an old blanket that smelled like dust and horse sweat. Neither of them spoke much. Rowan's shoulder throbbed, and Lila just stared into the flames like she could see her brother's face inside them. Around dawn, Jed stood and started packing the saddle. The air was cold enough to make their breath show. "We're going to Deadwood," he said. Rowan's voice cracked. "You mean you're taking us in?" Jed tightened the strap without looking up. "If I was, you'd already be in cuffs." Lila stepped closer. "Then why help us?" He looked at her for the first time since last night. His eyes were tired but steady. "Because I owed a man once. And debts like that don't die easy." They rode out before the sun cleared the ridge. The prairie stretched quiet and wide, the sky so open it almost hurt to look at. Lila kept close behind Jed, still clutching the saddlebag like it was her brother's heartbeat. Rowan rode slower, her arms stiff but holding on. After a while, the silence grew too heavy. "You knew him," Lila said. "The marshal." Jed nodded. "Boone was my partner. He died chasing the kind of people who make promises with guns. I should have been there." "You couldn't have known," she whispered. "Maybe not," he said, "but I could have tried harder." They reached the outskirts of Deadwood by mid-morning. The town looked alive and mean at the same time. Wagons rattling, miners shouting, women laughing too loud to sound happy. The smell of smoke and coffee mixed in the air. Jed pulled his horse to a stop near the bank. "Stay close. Don't talk unless you have to." The sisters followed him inside. The clerk behind the counter looked up, squinting at the three of them. "Morning. What can I do for you?" Jed placed the key on the polished wood. "Box 47. Need it open." The clerk frowned. "You the owner?" Jed didn't answer. His stare was enough. The man swallowed hard, then nodded and led them to the vault. The air inside was cold, heavy. Metal doors lined the walls like silent guards. The clerk turned the lock and pulled the small drawer open. Inside was a book wrapped in oilcloth. Jed unwrapped it carefully. The leather was worn smooth from years of use. He flipped it open. Pages filled with names, dates, payments, all written in the same sharp hand. Then one name stood out, circled twice in red ink: Deputy Miles Tully. Rowan's voice was barely a whisper. "That's a lawman." Jed's jaw tightened. "No, that's a liar in a badge." He tore the page free and folded it into his coat. "He's Rourke's inside man. There's a delivery marked for tonight near Pacola Creek." Lila's hand shook. "That's where Owen is." Jed looked at her, voice low. "Then that's where we end this." Outside, the air had changed. Clouds gathered over the hills, thunder rumbling far away. Rowan frowned up at the sky. "You really think we can stop him?" Jed gave a faint, humorless smile. "If we're lucky. If not, we make one hell of a story before we go." They mounted up again. Lila felt the saddle under her, heavy with secrets. She glanced at Jed riding ahead, silent and steady, and wondered what kind of man still helped strangers when he'd already lost too much. That night, the wind carried the smell of rain as they rode toward Pacola Creek. The sisters didn't talk much, just followed the sound of hoofbeats and the rhythm of their own fear. Every now and then, Jed looked back to make sure they were still there. Each time, Lila caught his eyes, and for a moment, she almost believed they'd survive this. Rowan whispered, "You trust him?" Lila didn't answer right away. "I think he's the first person who didn't lie." The thunder rolled closer. The night grew darker, and somewhere ahead, by the creek, a man named Clay Rourke was waiting with a gun and a promise to keep. By the time they reached the ridge above Pacola Creek, the sun was gone. The trees below swayed in the wind, shadows moving like ghosts between the old logging shacks. The smell of wet pine and smoke lingered in the air. From where they hid, Lila could see the flicker of lanterns and men pacing the camp. Her brother was down there somewhere, tied up, waiting, praying maybe. Jed crouched beside her, scanning the ground. "There," he whispered, pointing toward a post near the biggest shack. Even from a distance, Lila knew that shape. Owen's shoulders slumped, his head hanging. Her heart twisted. For a moment, she forgot to breathe. Rowan touched her arm. "We'll get him. You hear me?" Lila nodded, though her hands were shaking so hard she could barely keep hold of the reins. Jed studied the camp, his expression calm but hard. "Rourke's waiting for that key," he murmured. "So we give him something else instead." "What do you mean?" Rowan asked. Jed reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a small metal keg. The label was half torn, but the words "Signal Flare, Army Issue" were still visible. "Burns bright," he said quietly, and loud enough to wake the hills. Lila swallowed. "That's your plan?" Jed's eyes flicked toward her, steady and certain. "That's part of it." They waited until the wind shifted, carrying their scent away from the camp. Then they crept down through the grass, slow and low. The creek murmured beside them, covering the sound of their steps. Every time a horse snorted or a boot scuffed in the distance, Lila froze. She could almost feel Rourke's cold eyes on her. When they reached the edge of the clearing, Jed motioned for them to stay back. "I go first," he whispered. "If things go bad, get your brother and run north. Don't look back." Rowan grabbed his sleeve. "You'll get killed." Jed gave her a tired smile. "Been almost killed plenty. Still here." Then he slipped into the darkness. He moved like smoke, silent, unhurried, deadly. The sisters watched him until the shadows swallowed him whole. Lila's heart pounded so loud it hurt her ears. She wanted to pray, but didn't know what for anymore. A gunshot cracked the night. Then another. Shouts filled the camp. Chaos exploded like fire catching dry brush. Men ran in every direction, lanterns swinging wildly. Jed's voice cut through the noise. "Now!" Lila ran. The world blurred around her. She ducked between wagons, mud splashing up her legs, until she reached the post. "Owen!" she cried. He lifted his head slowly, his face bruised and pale. "Lila!" She cut the rope with a broken knife she'd kept hidden in her boot. "We have to go." Rowan fired a rifle she'd grabbed from a fallen guard, covering them. Each shot echoed like thunder. Jed appeared through the smoke, blood on his sleeve, but still moving. He grabbed Owen's arm, half dragging, half carrying him. Then Rourke stepped out onto the shack porch. His cigar glowed red in the dark. "You should have stayed out of this, Mallory." Jed raised his revolver, calm as a man lighting a fire. "Not my habit." The first bullet missed by an inch, slicing Rourke's hat clean off. Before he could raise his gun again, Jed struck a match and tossed it into the powder line. The explosion tore through the night. The sky lit up like dawn. Horses screamed, tents burst into flames, and men dove for cover. The sisters fell to the ground, shielding Owen as heat washed over them. Jed didn't stop. He pulled them to their feet. "Move!" They ran until the fire was just a glow behind them. Lila could taste smoke in her throat, her lungs burning with each breath. When they finally stopped on the ridge, everyone collapsed, muddy, shaking alive. Jed stood for a long moment, staring back at the flames. His jaw tightened, and for the first time, Lila saw something like peace on his face. He whispered something she almost didn't catch. "Boone." I paid it back. No one spoke for a while. The wind carried the crackle of fire across the valley, fading into the distance. Rowan pressed her forehead against Owen's shoulder, crying softly. When Jed turned back, his voice was quiet but sure. "We're not done yet. Rourke's gone, but there's still a snake left to cut." Lila looked at him, her face streaked with soot. "You mean the deputy?" Jed nodded. "Yeah, Miles Tully, the man who sold his badge." He looked east, where the stars hung low over the dark hills. "We ride at first light." Lila stared at him through tears and smoke. "And after that," Jed put his hat back on. "After that, we make sure this ends the right way." The fire below still burned, but the wind was shifting. And somewhere out there, beyond the ridge, the man in the black vest wasn't finished yet. The night never really ended, just faded into a dull, gray dawn. The fire from the camp still smoldered behind them, sending a thin column of smoke into the sky. By the time the first light touched the hills, they were already on the trail to Fort Me. The horses moved slow, worn out. So were the people riding them. Jed rode ahead, silent, his jaw set tight. Behind him, Owen leaned against Lila, weak but alive. Rowan's eyes stayed fixed on the horizon, like she was afraid to look back. After an hour, Lila spoke, her voice hoarse. "You really think Tully's behind it all?" Jed didn't turn around. "I don't think." "I know." Rowan frowned. "But he's the law." Jed let out a humorless laugh. "Law's just a word, sweetheart. It's the man behind it that makes it right or rotten." They rode on in silence for a while. The wind picked up, carrying the smell of rain. Owen finally stirred, groaning. "You came for me," he whispered. Lila smiled weakly. "Of course I did. You think I let you die before you paid me back for stealing my boots?" He tried to laugh, but it came out as a cough. "You shouldn't have come." Jed slowed his horse, glancing over. "Family's the only thing worth showing up for," he said. "That's what gets a man through hell." Lila looked at him, something soft in her eyes. "And what got you through it?" He hesitated, then said quietly, "Regret." They reached Fort Me by noon. The soldiers at the gate watched them ride in, surprise written all over their faces. Jed dismounted first, his boots heavy on the dirt. "I need to see the marshal," he said. The guard nodded, still staring at the sisters. "You bring in trouble, or ending it?" Jed gave a tired half-smile. "Guess we'll find out soon enough." Inside the small office, the air was thick with the smell of ink and tobacco. The marshal, an older man with gray hair and tired eyes, looked up from his desk. "Mallory? Thought you'd left this county for good." Jed tossed the oilcloth book onto the desk. "Wish I had." The marshal flipped through it, his face paling as he read. "Tully." Jed nodded. "He's been feeding Rourke names and schedules for months. The whole gold run was a setup. Boone found out. That's why he's dead." The marshal's hand tightened on the desk. "You sure?" Jed's eyes burned. "I buried Boone with that saddle. You tell me if I sound unsure." For a moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the ticking of the clock on the wall. Then the marshal sighed, heavy and slow. "Bring him in." Minutes later, Deputy Miles Tully was dragged through the door, hands bound, fury in his eyes. His badge was still pinned to his chest, shining like a lie. "You son of a bitch," he spat at Jed. "You don't know what you're doing." Jed didn't blink. "I know exactly what I'm doing." Tully sneered. "You think you're saving anyone? Rourke will come for you. He doesn't forgive. You'll die like Boone did, begging for time you don't have." Jed stepped closer, voice low but sharp as a blade. "Difference is I won't beg." The room went still. Even the marshal didn't move. Jed stared down the deputy until the man finally looked away. "You had a badge," Jed said quietly. "That used to mean something. You could have stood for what was right. Instead, you sold it for a sack of gold and a place at Rourke's table." Tully laughed, but there was no strength in it. "You think the world runs on right and wrong? It runs on who pulls the trigger first." Jed's hand brushed the revolver at his hip. "Then maybe it's time someone else pulled it." The marshal stepped in fast. "Jed," his tone was firm, almost pleading. "He'll hang legal. We'll do this the right way." Jed took a breath, stepped back. "Then you better make damn sure he does." The chains clanked as the soldiers dragged Tully out. He shouted over his shoulder, voice cracked with rage. "You can kill me, Mallory, but you'll never kill what I built." Jed didn't answer. He just watched him go, the fire in his eyes fading to something quieter. Sorrow, maybe. Rowan stepped closer, her voice small. "You could have shot him." Jed shook his head. "Killing him's easy. Living with it, that's the hard part." Outside, the sky broke open with rain. It fell heavy and clean, washing the dust from their faces. For the first time in days, the world smelled new again. Lila looked at Jed, voice trembling. "So, is it over?" Jed looked east, where Deadwood sat quiet in the distance. "Not yet," he said softly. "Some debts don't die with a man." Rain fell steady through the night, tapping against the fort's tin roof like a clock counting down. Nobody slept much. The storm didn't feel like it was washing the past away. It felt like it was warning them something worse was coming. Jed stood outside under the awning, the rain dripping off his hat. The brass key hung from a string around his neck now. He couldn't let it go. Not after everything it had cost. Behind him, Lila stepped out quietly, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. "You've been out here all night." Jed didn't turn. Couldn't rest. Ghosts get loud when the rain starts. She stood beside him, watching the lightning crawl across the dark sky. "You talk about Boone a lot." Jed's voice softened. "He was the best man I knew. Honest. Brave. Died because I trusted the wrong people." Lila hesitated. "You think trusting us was the wrong call, too?" Jed finally looked at her. His eyes were tired but kind. "If it was, it's one I'd make again." She smiled faintly, a little broken around the edges. "My brother's alive because of you. That's more than anyone's ever done for us." Before Jed could answer, the fort gate creaked open. A soaked soldier ran in, shouting, "Sir, there's something in the creek bodies." Jed and Lila followed as men rushed out with lanterns. The rain had turned the dirt to mud, but the sight froze them all. 3 men lay tangled in the reeds, faces pale under the water. One of them still wore a black vest. Rowan's voice broke from behind them. "That's Rourke." Jed stepped closer, his hand brushing the cold body. "No," he muttered, shaking his head. "Rourke's too smart to die this easy." The marshal frowned. "You think he staged this?" Jed looked toward the hills. "I think he's already halfway to Deadwood." Back in the barracks, the sisters sat with Owen, trying to warm their hands by the fire. Jed walked in, dripping wet, his face drawn. "Pack what you can," he said. "We're leaving." Rowan looked up, startled. "Leaving? We just got here." "He's not dead," Jed said flatly. "And if he's heading where I think, he'll burn that town to the ground before morning." Owen coughed weakly. "You can't fight him alone." Jed gave a dry half-smile. "Never planned to." Lila rose, defiant. "Then we're going with you." He studied her, silent for a long moment. "You sure you're ready for that kind of fight?" She nodded once. "You saved us, Jed. Let's pay it back." Something in her tone, steady, unshaken, made him stop arguing. He gave a short nod. "All right, but you do what I say when I say it. No heroics. No noise." "Deal," Rowan said, loading the rifle Jed had given her. As they saddled up, thunder growled in the distance again. The air smelled like smoke already, faint but real. Jed swung into his saddle, his voice low. "If I'm right, he's going for the bank. That key opens more than gold. It opens proof. Records. Names. Everything he used to buy half this territory." Lila frowned. "And if he gets it, then the law dies all over again." They rode through the rain until the fort lights vanished behind them. The road turned slick, and the hills seemed to close in on every side. The silence between thunderclaps was heavy, filled with the sound of hooves and hearts. Halfway down the valley, Rowan broke it. "Why keep that key?" she asked. "Why not just destroy it?" Jed's answer came after a long pause. "Because some truths deserve to be seen, even if they hurt." Lila's voice was quiet. "You think it'll fix things?" He shook his head. "Nothing gets fixed. It just gets faced." They rode the rest of the night under a restless sky. When dawn finally broke, Deadwood lay ahead, dark smoke rising where no fire should be. Jed slowed his horse. "He's here," he said, "and he's making his move." Lila looked toward the burning edge of town, her voice trembling. "Then so are we." Jed tipped his hat lower, his jaw set like iron. "Stay close. This ends today, one way or another." As they entered the town, the wind carried the faint sound of gunfire. Deadwood was burning. The wind pushed smoke through the narrow streets, turning the morning sun into a red blur. Horses screamed somewhere near the stables, and the sound of gunfire cracked through the air like breaking glass. Jed dismounted in the alley behind the general store, motioning for the sisters to follow. "Stay behind me. Don't move unless I tell you." Rowan checked the rifle in her hands. "We came this far, Mallory. Don't start treating us like glass now." Jed gave her a look. "Glass don't bleed, and I ain't losing anyone else today." They slipped through the backstreets, the mud slick under their boots. Every window they passed flickered with the glow of fire. The air smelled of ash and panic. When they reached the bank, the front doors were already blown open. Inside, two men lay dead near the counter, both wearing deputy badges. "Hell," Jed muttered. "He's been busy." From the back room came the sound of metal scraping, someone forcing open a lockbox. Jed motioned for silence, then moved closer. The sisters followed, keeping low. When they reached the door, he pushed it open with his boot. Rourke stood by the vault, the brass key glinting between his fingers. He didn't even flinch when Jed's revolver cocked. "Well," Rourke said, smiling slow, "didn't figure you'd ride this far to die." Jed's voice was steady, like steel. "You've been dying for a long time, Rourke. I just came to finish the ride." Rourke laughed. "You talk like you still believe in good men." "I don't," Jed said, "but I believe in last chances." Rourke's smile faded. "Then you already lost. The law you're fighting for, it's mine now. I bought it, paid for it in blood and gold." Jed took a step closer, gun raised. "Then you wasted your money." The two men stared at each other, the smoke curling between them like a ghost. Lila's hands trembled where she hid behind the counter. She saw something move near Rourke's coat, his left hand, slow, reaching. "Jed," she cried. The gunfire hit like thunder. Jed dove to the side, firing once, twice. Rourke stumbled back, clutching his shoulder, but he didn't fall. He fired again, the bullet grazing Jed's hat and splintering wood beside Rowan's face. Rowan dropped behind the desk, reloading fast. "You're insane," she shouted. Rourke grinned through his pain. "No, girl. I'm just better at surviving." Jed's jaw clenched. "Not today." They moved at the same time, Rourke for his second gun, Jed straight through the smoke. The two collided, crashing into the vault door. The sound echoed like a church bell. Rourke's gun skidded across the floor. Jed pinned him with one hand, pressing the barrel of his Colt to Rourke's chest. Rain dripped from his hat brim, mixing with blood on his knuckles. Rourke laughed, breathless. "Go on, Marshall. Do it. You think pulling that trigger makes you clean?" Jed's voice was low, rough. "No, it just makes the world quieter." He didn't pull the trigger. Not yet. Something in his eyes shifted, softer for just a moment. "You killed Boone," he said. "He trusted you. Called you a friend." Rourke sneered. He was a fool. Trusted the wrong man, too. "You." Jed's hand shook once. Then he slammed the revolver across Rourke's face, sending him to the floor. "You don't get to speak his name," Jed said. The fight was over. Rourke lay still, blood pooling under his head. Jed stepped back, chest heaving. Lila moved closer, voice trembling. "You didn't kill him." Jed holstered his gun. "Didn't have to. Some men die the moment the truth hits him." Rowan knelt by the fallen key on the ground. "So this is what all of this was for?" Jed nodded, picking it up. "Yeah, proof. Names. Everything he used to own this town." He turned to the sisters, eyes heavy but calm. "You hold on to this. It's not gold, but it's worth more than you'll ever find buried in dirt." Lila took it gently, her hand brushing his. "What about you?" Jed looked toward the flames eating through the street. "Me? I got one more stop to make." Owen's voice came weakly from the doorway. He had followed them in, limping, pale but alive. "Jed, it's over. You did it." Jed gave a faint smile. "Maybe for me, but not for this town." He walked outside into the rain, the fire reflecting in his eyes. Behind him, the sisters stood in silence, the brass key glinting between their fingers like a promise they didn't yet understand. Rowan whispered, "You think he'll come back?" Lila watched Jed's shadow disappear into the smoke. "If he does, it'll be when someone else needs saving." The fire took half the town before the rain finally won. By morning, Deadwood was nothing but smoke and silence. The streets were lined with ashes, black as gunpowder. Lila sat on the edge of the boardwalk, her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee gone cold. Her brother rested inside the doctor's office, still too weak to stand. Rowan was helping shovel debris with what strength she had left. It felt like the whole town was trying to bury what happened before the sun could see it. Jed stood across the street, watching the sheriff nail a new notice to the burnt wall of the bank. "Rourke's dead," the man said, shaking his head. "Guess that makes you the closest thing we got a law now." Jed's voice was quiet but firm. "Don't mistake me for that. I'm just a man cleaning up what I helped make dirty." The sheriff hesitated. "You could stay, Mallory. Folks would follow you." Jed looked toward the rising hills. They shouldn't have to. When the sheriff left, Lila walked over. Her face was streaked with soot, eyes red but steady. You're leaving, aren't you? Jed didn't answer right away. He picked up a burnt piece of wood, tossed it aside. This town doesn't need me hanging around. It needs people who still believe it can get better. She folded her arms. And what about us? You saved my brother. Saved this whole damn place. Doesn't that count for something? Jed looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time since the fire. It counts, he said softly, but it doesn't fix what's broken in me. Rowan joined them, her voice sharp from exhaustion. You talk like you're some ghost that just wanders from mess to mess. Maybe it's time you stopped running. Jed smirked faintly. Running's what I do best. Lila stepped closer, her tone steady now. You can't spend your life paying for someone else's death. He met her eyes. You ever watch a man die knowing it should have been you instead? She didn't flinch. No, but I've watched people give up on living, and that's worse. Jed looked away, his jaw tightening. The words hit harder than any bullet. After a long silence, Rowan spoke, her voice softer now. Boone wouldn't want you carrying that weight forever. You honored him. You did what he couldn't. Jed nodded slowly. Maybe, but the past don't just fade because we say so. Lila held out the brass key, shining faintly in her palm. Then take it. In it for good. Jed hesitated. That's yours now. I don't want it, she said. It's just another chain if we keep it. He looked at her hand, then at her face, strong, scarred alive. Finally, he took the key. You're right. Some things aren't meant to be held. He walked to the river that cut through the town and stopped at the edge. The current was still muddy from a storm. With a slow breath, he let the key drop into the water. It sank without a sound. Rowan whispered, That's it. Jed nodded. That's it. The sisters stood behind him in silence. For the first time, the wind didn't feel cold. Lila stepped forward, her voice barely above a whisper. You could stay, Jed. Maybe try being part of something again. He turned, and for a moment, there was a flicker of something in his eyes. Hope, maybe. I've been part of something, he said quietly. You two prove that. Rowan smiled through tears. So where do you go now? Jed put on his hat, glancing at the horizon where the road disappeared between the trees. Wherever there's a fight worth having. He started walking, his boots echoing against the wet boards. Lila called out, You'll find it? Jed stopped, looked back once. Always do. Then he was gone. Rowan stood beside her sister, both silent for a long time. The smoke lifted, revealing a sky washed clean by rain. Lila wiped her face, a faint smile breaking through the exhaustion. You think he'll ever stop running? Rowan looked at the road, her voice soft but sure. Maybe he already has. Days passed before Deadwood began to sound alive again. Smoke no longer rose from the buildings, just the morning mist curling off the hills. People rebuilt in silence, one plank at a time, like they were afraid of speaking too loud might wake the ghosts they'd buried. Lila helped repair the porch outside the doctor's office while Rowan tended to Owen's shoulder. None of them talked much about the creek or Rourke or Jed. It felt easier that way, like silence could heal faster than words. Then, one afternoon, a shadow fell across the steps. Lila looked up. Jed Mallory stood there, hat in hand, dust on his coat, that same quiet look in his eyes. Rowan smiled first. You don't knock much, do you? Jed gave a faint grin. Didn't think I needed to. Owen pushed himself upright, surprised. You're still breathing. Guess that makes two of us. Barely, Jed said. He leaned against the porch rail, looking out at the rebuilt street. Town's starting to look like it used to. Better, maybe, Lila said. He nodded. Good. Means I can leave it in the right hands. Lila frowned. You're leaving again? Jed's gaze stayed fixed on the horizon. Was never one for standing still. But I wanted to say goodbye proper this time. Rowan crossed her arms. You're terrible at goodbyes. Jed smirked. Yeah, but I keep trying. There was a small silence then, warm and familiar. The kind that happens when people finally understand each other. Lila took a deep breath. You think we'll ever see you again? He looked at her, and his voice softened. Maybe. If you ever find yourself standing where right feels harder than wrong, look around. I'll be close enough. She smiled, though her eyes shimmered. You really think there's still good left in this world? Jed's eyes lifted toward the hills, the sun catching the edge of his hat brim. There's always good, he said quietly. Sometimes it just needs a few stubborn fools to keep it alive. Rowan laughed softly. Guess that makes you the biggest fool of all. Wouldn't be the first time, Jed said with a grin. He turned to go, but Lila called after him. Jed. He stopped. Boone would have been proud, she said. Jed didn't look back. I hope so, he murmured. Then he walked down the road, the dust rising behind him like a memory, fading slow. They watched him until he was nothing but a small figure against the light. Rowan finally said, He's never going to stop riding, is he? Lila smiled faintly. No, but maybe that's what keeps the rest of us safe. Owen leaned against the doorframe, his voice tired but steady. Some men fight to live. Some live to fight for others. He's the second kind. The wind shifted, carrying the smell of rain again, clean, calm, like the world was finally starting over. Lila looked toward the empty road. Funny thing, she said softly. All that blood, all that loss, and still, he taught us more about living than anyone else ever did. Rowan glanced at her. And what's that? That you don't wait for the world to fix itself, Lila said. You show up, even if it hurts, even if you're scared. You do the right thing before it's too late. Rowan nodded, her eyes shining. Guess that's the lesson, huh? Lila smiled. Yeah, be on time for the people who need you. The wind swept through town, gentle now, brushing away the last of the ash. The sisters stood there a while longer, the road ahead bright and endless. And somewhere beyond the ridge, a lone rider kept moving, hat low, coat flapping against the wind. The world wasn't fixed, but for the first time in a long time, it felt worth saving. Because some debts aren't about gold or blood. They're about showing up when it matters. And Jed Mallory always did.